I signed where the manager tapped, the cheap pen squeaking over carbon paper. His signature landed under mine, same tidy loop and slash I'd noticed pages back next to Marcus Hale. He handed me the key fob and a laminated SOP sheet. "Don't lose it," he said, like that would be my worst mistake. He left in a hurry. Outside the driveway, heat clung to the asphalt. Inside the house, the air met me like a basement, cool, stale, and a little wet. I need this job. Half my paycheck is already gone. Tuition invoices for my kid, another half to pills with names that sound like apologies. Keep the job. Keep the lights. The foyer swallowed sound. Leather that had sweated mold. Beeswax rubbed into oak until it shone like old teeth. Persian rugs exhaling dust when I walked. The crystal chandelier over my head made a delicate sound. Tick. Like hot glass settling, even though the AC was blowing cold. Santa Ana air had cracked the skin on my knuckles. When I flexed my hands, the glove lines stung. Out on the hill, a Ferrari revved twice and wound away, some neighbor going nowhere fast. My Civic's clear coat peeling like sunburn. A tiny dog yapped from a yard I can't afford to live near. The security room sat off the kitchen, a narrow, windowless ribcage of a space. I threw the breaker. The wall of CRTs came up in small thunderclaps. Tack, tack, tack. Blue-green light washed my fingers, made the veins look like map lines. The feed steadied into a jittery grid. Driveway, gate, garden path, dry pool. Each frame vibrating with that Los Angeles night grain, as if the city hums into the wires and won't stop. The intercom panel to the left wore yellowed button caps and a label maker's idea of order. I logged on the clipboard. 1946, manager departed, gate secured. Fob sink, green. Coffee from a gas station thermos. It hit my tongue like pennies, cold enough to tighten my chest. I drank anyway, because nights stretch. The mug felt wrong in my hand, too light. I set it down, and the chandelier in the hall answered with another quiet tick. The photo wall runs the main corridor, a parade of strangers who never expected to die. Studio men in tuxedos, glittering women fading into wallpaper. I stopped at a 30s family portrait, father with a producer's smile, mother with fingers perched like commas, and a girl in a blue dress who looks like she was told not to blink and obeyed until it hurt. The gilt spider-webbed around the frame. Lemon polish and somebody's old perfume stunned the back of my nose. Back at the front door, I noticed the envelope, wedged under the inner jamb like it wanted to stay in. White, gone gray at the edges, block letters across the face, Ethan. On the back, pressed ghost letters, Marcus. I carried it to the desk and closed the door. Paper rasped when I opened it. My fingers left a clean stripe on the dust. If you're reading this, you're where I was. Don't throw this away. 5 rules. Follow them exactly if you want to keep your mind and body your own. Camp rules. Rule 1. If you see the child in the blue dress in the drive, do not approach or speak. Leave the property. Return in daylight. Rule 2. Voices will call from the garden or empty rooms. They will sound like people you love. Do not answer. Do not look. Rule 3. Do not step outside at night unless the driveway lights are on. If they fail, stay inside, no matter what you hear. Rule 4. Footsteps upstairs begin at 2 a.m. Do not investigate. Do not climb. They stop when they stop. Rule 5. You'll see a man by the fence with red eyes. Never look directly. Close the curtains. Wait. These aren't superstitions. They're borders. Cross them, and you won't come back as you. A laugh came out of me, thin and wrong. Escape room, 1920s edition. The nearest CRT popped. Picture rolling once and snapping straight. I pressed the letter flat with my palm and felt the scribble ridges under the pen strokes like they were still warm. I folded the page in half, then again. It should have gone in the trash. It went into my breast pocket instead, where I keep receipts that matter. Rent, meds, field trip slips. Blue-green CRT glow bled over the desk, turned my skin a morgue color. In the hallway, the girl in the blue dress kept smiling at something behind me. I wrote in the log, 2026, envelope recovered. Contents, prior guard rules. Status, no anomalies. The chandelier ticked again. A small sound, but it went through the house like a vein. The next night started slow, which should have been a blessing. It wasn't. Cold coffee sweated in the thermos, bitter enough to peel enamel. I leaned back in the chair, CRT glow washing me green, and muttered, "This is worse than working the graveyard shift at a 7-Eleven. At least there I got free hot dogs, and drunks for company." I should have left it at that. Boredom is safer than curiosity in this place. The wind changed after midnight. Santa Ana, dry and abrasive, shoved dust through the palms and made the whole fence line hiss. Every gust was like a hand rubbing the skin raw. My knuckles were already split from yesterday. I counted the columns along the driveway on Camo 1, just something for my mind to chew. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I always stop at 5. OCD or not, it feels like a rule in itself. Touch 5, stop breathing, survive. The chandelier ticked in the hall. Tick. My teeth clicked with it. At the 1:14, the feed on Camo 1 wavered. A gray wash, then steady again. And she was standing there, dead center in the drive. The girl in the blue dress, same puffed shoulders, same face I'd seen frozen in sepia on the wall. Only now, she wasn't a photograph. Her arms hung too straight at her sides, fingers curled like she'd forgotten how to unclench. The camera struggled with her eyes. They came out wrong. Black gaps that pulled the picture toward them. I stood before I realized it. Hand went for the flashlight, then the key fob. Then one step toward the door, like muscle memory had decided the job meant approach. Because that's what you do when something's on the property. You check it. It's protocol. The chandelier ticked, harder this time, like something was cracking under the glass. I looked again at the paper in my breast pocket, edges soft from my sweat. Rule number 1, don't approach, don't speak, leave the property. Come back in daylight. I thought about ignoring it. I thought about my paycheck, about the line in the SOP, investigate anomalies on perimeter first. I thought about the tuition invoice with red print due next week. You want to feed your kid, you keep your job. You keep your job, you follow the SOP. My mouth was already halfway open. Hey, I bit down so hard my lips split. The taste of iron snapped me back. I whispered to myself, one step more and you're back in eviction court. The CRT rolled again, like film skipping. When the picture steadied, she was closer. 6 feet nearer the gate, still looking straight ahead. My stomach lurched. The kind of lurch you get when an elevator misses a beat. I forced myself back into the chair. Hands shaking, I wrote in the log, subject cited, driveway. Did not engage, returned to station. The words looked stupid even as I wrote them. Subject cited. Like she was just a trespasser in a private neighborhood. Like you could write this up and hand it to a cop. I stared at the screen. I stared at the tea light burned phantom squares into my eyes. She didn't move again. Not until 2, when the chandelier ticked and the camera snowed white. When the picture cleared, the drive was empty. I should have felt relief. I didn't. Because when I stepped out at dawn, with the gate still locked and the air carrying that acrid morning ozone, I saw them. Long drag marks down the driveway asphalt. Not tire tread. Not an animal. 4 parallel scratches gouged deep as if something had been pulled away, clawing for grip. I bent, ran a finger over one, sharp enough to break the nail. Back inside, the girl's photograph on the wall looked exactly the same. Smile obedient, dress neat, frame cracked at the edges. Except, I swear, the crack had widened. Just enough that the glass would cut if I touched it. I wrote in the log one last line before I clocked out. Driveway surface, scratches, unknown origin. No anomalies, I almost added. But my lips still throbbed where I bit it, and the copper taste hadn't faded. The chandelier ticked again, even in daylight. Dawn didn't make me feel safer. It just made the scratches on the driveway more visible. 4 grooves, as if the asphalt had been combed by something that didn't want to let go. I wrote it down in the log, like writing could pin it to earth, like paper could make it normal. Third night, same routine, coffee still bitter, thermos still sweating. My Civic still looking pathetic, parked next to a Bentley nobody drives. The Santa Ana winds were worse, snapping dry palm fronds against the stucco. Dust in my throat tasted like pennies left in rain. Cam 4, the pool. That's where I kept looking. Wide shot of the empty basin, drained years ago, ringed with blue tiles stained green. The concrete inside was cracked like a map of rivers, thin weeds sprouting. A dead pool in the middle of Beverly Hills. That alone should have told me this job wasn't right. The smell carried even inside. Chlorine, sharp enough to make my nose itch. I sneezed twice and muttered, "Guess the rich keep their ghosts disinfected." My skin prickled. That's the thing about chlorine, it clings. Even when it's dry, it feels like it coats your lungs. At 43, the intercom by the garden hedge hissed. The one nobody uses. It popped alive like a radio catching rogue stations. Static, then a voice. "Ethan." My whole body locked. Because it wasn't just any voice, it was my mother's. Weak, hoarse from the meds, but clear. Clear enough that my throat burned. "Ethan, can I? Help me." I pushed back from the chair, knees cracking. Every survival instinct from the rules said, don't answer, don't acknowledge. Rule number 2. But every other instinct, the human one, said get closer. Press the damn button. The chandelier ticked overhead. Slow. Deliberate. Tick. I found myself already moving. Hand out, palm brushing the desk, half a step to the intercom. The button waited, big and red like a lifeboat handle. "Please. It's so cold." My chest felt like it caved in, because those were her exact words last week when I'd called her from the pharmacy. My finger touched the plastic, just touched, enough to feel the slight give, the cheap ridges under my nail. And then I saw it. Camera 4. The pool feed flickered. The basin wasn't empty anymore. Water shimmered there, silver under the moon, rippling. But the ripple moved wrong, like the film had been mirrored. Something stood at the center. Small frame, shoulders stiff, a girl in blue, her head tilted back, her mouth opened. And the voice came through the intercom again. My mother's voice. The chandelier ticked so hard, I thought the chain would snap. I bit the inside of my cheek until blood flooded in. Whispered to myself, "This is just level 3 of the escape room. Fail it and you don't respawn." I yanked my hand back, sat down so hard the chair screamed on the tile. My pulse hammered in my ears, each beat louder than the intercom hiss. Then silence. Feed steadied. The pool was dry again. Empty cracks, weeds, moonlight. But I swear, the air still smelled wetter, sharper, like chlorine vapor clung to my clothes. I rubbed my jacket sleeve, but the stench didn't lift. I logged it because that's what you do when you can't trust memory. Intercom, activated. Voice, imitation maternal. No response given. Fordive pool feed visual distortion. Anomaly present, reverted. My handwriting shook. Each word slanted like it wanted to run off the page. At dawn, I stepped out for air. The wind had died, the city below humming with morning traffic. The driveway scratches still looked fresh. And by the hedge, near the dead pool, a smear of wet footprints dried into the dust. Small. Barefoot. Leading nowhere. I followed them 2 steps. Stopped cold. They ended right in front of the intercom. As if something had been standing there all night, waiting for me to press the button. Back inside, the chandelier ticked once. Just once. Like it knew I'd passed, but barely. 2 a.m. The chandelier ticked like a cheap metronome above me. I was slouched in the guard chair, head swimming in the stink of old coffee. My thermos was down to dregs, lukewarm and bitter as pennies. I stared at the logbook, pen tapping, and muttered, "This paycheck covers half Mom's pills. That's it. Half. And I'm babysitting a corpse of a house." Then I heard it. Steps. From the ceiling above, slow and deliberate. Not the scamper of rats. Not the shifting of wood. Shoes. 4 steps. Then silence. 15 seconds. 4 more, measured exactly the same. The chandelier swayed with each sound, crystal arms scattering fractured light across the walls. Dust rained down in lazy threads, one fleck landing in my coffee. I pushed it away. My chest tightened, skin prickling like a static charge before lightning. Rule number 4. I had memorized it by now. If you hear footsteps on the attic stairs between 2 and 3 a.m., do not go up. Do not speak. Do not move. I gripped the pen so hard it left ridges in my fingers, because every part of my job reflex screamed otherwise. Guard hears noise upstairs, you investigate. You check doors, windows, lock the place down. You don't just sit there. That's dereliction. That's losing the job. Tick. The chandelier tilted a fraction, glass beads clinking. More dust rained, bigger this time. White flakes like snow onto the logbook page. The drywall was cracking. A fine red line snaked out across the plaster. Not normal red, deeper, wet-looking, like something bleeding through. Another 4 steps, then silence. I stood halfway, flashlight in hand before I even realized it. The ceiling groaned above. I aimed the beam at the hatch in the corner, the fold-down attic ladder. The wood shuddered once. Not from wind, there was no wind in the sealed house. From pressure above, weight testing it. I froze, beam shaking. The chandelier ticked again. Louder, like it was warning me. I thought of the intercom last night. My mother's voice begging me to answer. The pool that had filled with water and then emptied in a blink. The girl in blue at the driveway. Every rule so far had teeth. I swallowed the panic clawing up my throat and sat down hard. Pressed my hands flat to the desk to anchor them. Don't move, don't talk, don't breathe. I whispered to myself, repeating the rule like a chant. The chandelier stopped swaying. The steps resumed, heavier now, dragging. They reached the edge of the hatch. I could see the wood bow, could hear nails creak. Something leaned over from above. The air went colder, like the AC had kicked down to morgue temperature. My skin tightened over bone. 15 seconds, the longest in my life. Then the steps receded, one by one. Measured again, farther and farther until silence settled heavy as a lid. 3 a.m. on the dot, my watch beeped. The chandelier gave one final tick. The red crack in the ceiling pulsed once and then dulled, drying into plain plaster dust. I forced myself to log it. Footsteps overhead. Repeated, cyclical. Ceiling dust fissure observed. No response given. My handwriting looked like a drunk's. Slanted, smudged. I capped the pen and sat back, chest heaving. For a moment I thought I was safe. Then the chandelier ticked again. Different. Not glass this time. Wet, a drop. I looked up. The red crack had widened, spidering out, and from its seam a bead of liquid fattened. Dark. Viscous. It fell, splattering on the logbook. Not paint, not rust. Blood. The word I'd just written, footsteps, bled into a crimson smear. I didn't sleep the rest of the shift. Couldn't. The chandelier ticked over me until dawn. Not crystal against crystal, but a heartbeat. At 7:15 a.m. the house finally went still. I shut the logbook, my sleeve smearing the blood into a dull brown streak. Status, no breach. Status, no anomalies, except me. 2018. Shift midpoint. The house is quiet the way a morgue is quiet. Soundless but heavy. Like noise is crouched somewhere waiting to pounce. I sat in the security room, mug of cold coffee resting in my palm, tapping my thumbnail against the logbook line I'd just finished. A nervous metronome. 2019, patrol complete. No anomalies. The chandelier above ticked once, crystal tapping crystal like teeth. Driveway cam 1. Rolled static across the screen, a faint band of snow drifting down like bad weather on old film. I leaned forward, rubbed my eyes. Then west fence, cam row 3, lit with motion. Pause. There was a man outside the wrought iron, framed by the glow of the streetlights from the road below. At first glance he could have been anyone, a jogger who'd taken a wrong turn, a drunk cutting through the hills. Except, he wasn't moving. He was standing too still. I toggled zoom. The CRT whined, the picture bent inward. His face refused to resolve, smeared into the snow of the feed. But his outline was there, tall, head tilted just wrong, like a mannequin propped up. I reached instinctively for the spotlight controls. A normal guard's move. Light him up, identify, call it in. The toggle switch felt warm under my thumb. Pivot. The feed stuttered, lines collapsing toward the center. Then the picture cleared just enough. His head turned toward the camera. And 2 points of red bloomed where eyes should be. Not light, not reflection. They weren't shining, they were burning. And the second I saw them, something shoved into me, like a speaker blowing static straight through bone. Ears roared, stomach clenched, vision doubled. The CRT itself went crimson, a bloody wash flooding across all channels at once. Twist. I ripped my eyes away, chair screeching on the tile. My head spun, bile crawling up my throat. It felt like being pressed underwater with speakers blaring, ribs buzzing against each other. The chandelier ticked overhead, once sharp, like it was keeping time with my nausea. I stumbled to the window, yanked the blinds closed with shaking hands. Don't look, don't look. My whisper scraped dry, the same chant I'd muttered last night when the voice of my mother came through the intercom. The room swam. CRTs flickered back into normal feeds. Driveway empty, garden swaying. Pool cracked, no red, no man. I stayed crouched against the blinds, heartbeat refusing to slow. It wasn't just panic, there'd been a price already. At dawn, when the first sunlight clawed down the hill, I went out front. The air smelled burnt, metallic. The row of palm trees along the fence sagged like old men. The one nearest where he'd stood had turned black overnight. Fronds curled in on themselves, trunks split, sap dried into resin like congealed blood. I touched the bark with a gloved finger. It crumbled into dust, dust that tasted bitter in the back of my throat even through the mask. Behind me, somewhere in the still house, the chandelier ticked again. Faint, patient. Log Entrix 42. Subject observed at west fence, approximate height 6'2". No ID possible. Feed corrupted, color distortion, sound resonance. Immediate physical effect, nausea, vertigo. Environmental consequence, palm tree death overnight. Status, anomaly confirmed. I closed the logbook too hard. Dust rose from the pages and floated in the slice of dawn light like pale ash. I knew better than to let myself stare at it, because it wasn't just dust anymore. It smelled faintly of chlorine. 2041. The house had settled into the kind of silence that makes you want to whisper, like you'd wake it up if you weren't careful. The CRTs hummed blue across my arms. Chandelier ticked twice above, lazy and patient. I was halfway through a stale granola bar, muttering about how $6 an hour barely covered gas, when every monitor blinked once, then black. Push. The driveway lights, those 5 sodium yellow sentinels I'd been counting compulsively all week, snapped off at the same time. The hillside outside swallowed in Santa Ana dark. The CRTs showed nothing but the shape of the iron gate buried in static. Pause. Rule number 3 sang in my head like a schoolyard jingle. Never step into the driveway if the lights go out. I rubbed my eyes, thinking generator. I'd walked the property twice tonight. Backup diesel smelled fine. Steady hum. A normal guard would check the circuit, log the trip, restore power. A normal guard wouldn't be sitting in a house where rules bleed into the walls. My thumb worked the key fob in my pocket, its plastic ridges dug into my palm. If those lights didn't come back on, the manager would cut me from the roster. No paycheck, no eviction reprieve, no medicine for mom. The chandelier ticked again, like it was waiting. Pivot. I swore under my breath and shoved out the front door. Air slammed into me. Santa Ana wind, hot and dry as a hairdryer, carrying the faint stink of burnt palm resin from the tree that had rotted overnight. The driveway spread wide in front of me, a river of black asphalt slick with dew. No lamps, no glow, just the weak spill of moonlight across stone lions at the gate. I thumbed the key fob. Nothing. Pressed again, harder. Red LED winked, but the lamps stayed dead. My chest tightened. The quiet wasn't quiet anymore. It was full of something breathing. Not one thing. Many. Whispered syllables weaving around me, in and out of the wind, overlapping until they formed a crowd I couldn't see. I spun, flashlight beam catching only the shimmer of my own breath. "Power check," I muttered, trying to anchor myself. My voice sounded borrowed, too loud in the dark. The whispers pressed closer, overlapping like radio stations colliding. My name threaded through, Ethan, Ethan, in a dozen wrong cadences from baritone to child's giggle. Twist. The key fob slipped in my sweat. My fingers shook, jammed it against the receiver box by the gate. The green LED should have blinked. Instead, nothing but a red spark and a hiss like wet wires. My throat dried, air thickened, shapes moved at the edge of vision, sliding across asphalt with no feet, just shadows bending wrong. I bolted, sprinting back across the driveway, lungs choking on the smell of hot metal and chlorine. My shoes slapped too loud, an intruder in my own route. The whispers surged as I reached the porch. Dozens of voices collapsing into one long exhale that brushed the back of my neck. I slammed the door shut, key fob clattering onto the marble. Inside, silence dropped like a curtain. The chandelier ticked overhead, just once. I slid to the floor, chest heaving, listening to my pulse fill the room. When I finally stood, I checked the CRTs again. Driveway feed had returned, all 5 lamps glowing like they'd never gone out. Gate steady. Stone lions asleep in sodium haze. Log entry, 2258. Driveway lights failed simultaneously. Generator functional, no reason for outage. Stepped outside against Rule 3. Key fob failed. Voices heard in multiple registers calling my name. Felt physical presence. Returned inside. Lights restored instantly. Environmental, residual odor of chlorine. I capped the pen too hard, ink blotting the margin. The chandelier above me ticked again. Faint, mocking, like it had been watching. 034. The house exhaled. I sat in the library, still sweating from the driveway sprint. My lungs burned chlorine, even though I hadn't been near the pool. Every breath tasted metallic, like the air itself had been soldered shut. The chandelier ticked once. Mocking. I should have been relieved. The generator had finally kicked and the cameras glowed steady again. Driveway lit, fence clear. All readings normal. But normal had stopped meaning anything hours ago. I killed the desk lamp to let my eyes adjust. The library looked like a mausoleum staged for a magazine spread. Crystal ashtrays lined up on a Persian rug sagging under water stains. Old movie posters, original prints worth more than my car, hung crooked on wood-paneled walls. One had peeled, curling back to reveal raw plaster beneath, veins of mildew like handwriting. That's when the sprinklers hissed. At first I thought, relief. Automatic system. Maybe the house still worked. Then the spray hit my cheek, warm, sticky, metallic. I stared up. The sprinkler heads misted not water, but a diluted pink fog. It stunned my skin, sweet and rusty, perfume poured too heavy. The rug bloomed with spreading stains, wine red, not water. I bolted upright, shirt clinging, and every framed poster dripped with it. The face of a 1930s ingenue bled until her smile split apart. My hands shook. Instinct said, wipe it off. Clean. Restore order. Guard reflex. I rubbed my palm across my face, smearing it worse. Then the mirror caught me. A gilt oval hung between 2 bookshelves. Its glass was old, rippled. My reflection stared back, mask of red across my mouth and jaw. I scrubbed harder, but the words wouldn't fade. They weren't on the mirror, they were on me. Follow her. Each letter scrawled in the same deep red, biting into my skin like it had been branded there. I stumbled back, heart hammering. No, no, no. The chandelier ticked. Something thudded from the hallway. The guard log slipped from the desk when I jerked around. It landed open. Pages curled like brittle leaves. Names marched down in cramped block letters, each crossed with a smear. Dates stopped mid-entry. Half a dozen guards before me. The last page was clean, except for one signature. Marcus Hale. His name heavy, pressed into the paper like it had been carved with a nail. Below it, in a different hand, one single word. Approved. Same hand that signed my contract, same ridged pen stroke. My stomach turned. The sprinklers hissed louder, filling the air with copper perfume. My eyes watered, throat closed, like the fog was crawling inside me. I grabbed the logbook with shaking fingers, forcing myself to read. Most entries looked like mine. Timestamps, anomalies, notes. But then the handwriting shifted. Marcus had begun to write in fragments, like orders he'd been given. Stand still. Don't look back. Say nothing. Then one final line, ink bled so deep it punched through the page. Rules changed, I have to follow. The mirror caught me again. Follow her. Scrawled bigger, darker, across my reflection. Letters breathing like veins. The chandelier ticked twice, and over the hiss of pink rain, I heard her. A laugh? Small, bright, like a child playing hide-and-seek in the next room. Beatrice. The little girl from the driveway, except the sound wasn't outside anymore. It was here, inside the house. Log entry 328 library. Sprinkler discharge, fluid equals red, metallic odor. Unknown particulate inhaled. Poster damage, mirror anomaly, letters appeared on face, not glass. Logbook recovered, previous guards listed. Final entry, Marcus Hale, signature matches management. Additional presence confirmed inside perimeter. Status, rules no longer stable. The chandelier ticked once more. A pulse. The house wasn't silent anymore. It was crowded. Every monitor on the CRT wall flickered, each frame filled with what shouldn't overlap. Cam 01, driveway. Beatrice in her blue dress, hands folded, head tilted. Cam 02, fence, the red eyes burning holes into the static. Cam 04, attic feed, the hatch trembling like lungs, dust raining in slow coughs. All channels alive at once, like the rules had snapped and the house had stopped choosing. The chandelier above me ticked. Not one beat at a time, but rapid, erratic like a failing heart monitor. I gripped the logbook, pen stuttering against the paper. 57, simultaneous anomalies, rule conflict. The ink blot spread, trembling with each vibration of the ceiling. The floor shook. At first it was subtle, like the hill shifting under foundation. Then dust poured from the ceiling vents. Red dust, metallic tang sharp as pennies shoved up both nostrils. My throat closed. The air thickened, heat rising in waves though the AC still hummed. The Santa Ana winds outside whined through window frames, hot and sour, carrying a faint sweetness, chlorine. The fire alarm screamed awake. Red strobes lit the library, casting Beatrice's portrait in epileptic frames, smiling, melting, reforming. I yanked the key fob. Dead. The green LED never blinked. The doors all around me clicked, bolts slamming shut like a prison lockdown. Smart home system clamped down, locks sealing in sync with the alarms. Jesus, no. My voice sounded tiny against the shriek of alarms. From the attic, the hatch slammed open and shut, faster than breath. A low drone leaked through the cracks above, that same engine hum I'd heard outside the fence when I saw the red eyes. The whole ceiling vibrated. I coughed red grit, bent double. My lungs clawed for air, pulling in nothing but furnace-dry heat. The logbook slipped from my hand, pages catching sprinkler mist still dripping from earlier, bleeding my words into pink rivers. Options. 0. The rules had said, do not go up at 2 a.m., but the floor itself pushed me upward. The plaster bulged downward, splitting in jagged lines, cracks glowing red from within. The chandelier shook so violently its crystal teeth clashed, ringing out like knives struck together. Whispers joined the alarm. Different voices overlapping. Some were children giggling, some men muttering, some bent into static. One voice, hers clear as glass, follow me. Beatrice, right outside in the driveway. On screen, her black eyes stared directly into the lens, and for a heartbeat the glass bulged outward, as if she could push through. The house filled with her presence. I staggered backward until my calves hit the ladder beneath the attic hatch. The wood quivered like something already climbing down, not waiting for me to go up. Fuck. My throat scraped raw. If I stay down here, I choke. If I go up, I break Rule 4. The alarms cut, dead, sudden. Silence collapsed in their place. Then thump. Dust showered my shoulders. The attic hatch slammed open, rope ladder uncoiling, swaying down until it touched my chest. No choice. I climbed, hands on rough rope, splinters digging. My breath tore in and out, catching metallic grit. The red dust clung to my tongue, bitter as oxidized blood. Halfway up, I risked one glance down. The library wasn't empty anymore. Shapes leaned out of the sprinkler mist, long arms, black gaps where eyes should be, all turning their heads in perfect sync. The logbook floated, pages fanned, turning themselves, writing lines in wet ink without a hand. The chandelier stopped ticking, and in the pause, the hatch above me exhaled heat and a smell I recognized too well. Chlorine, sharp and sweet, like pool water left to rot. I hauled myself up through the opening, breaking Rule 4, because there was no other breath left to steal. Log suspended. Environment unstable. All rules compromised. Route 107 a.m. The attic swallowed me whole. Heat pressed against my face like I'd climbed into a furnace chimney. My flashlight beam cut through dense air, thick with dust motes. No, red grains still falling from unseen vents. The smell of chlorine sat heavy in my sinuses, mixed with the sour of mildew and something sweeter, old wine turned syrup. Boxes towered around me, stacks labeled in curling ink, 1948, 1952, 1960. Film reels rusted in tins, rags stuffed in crates. The insulation sagged like old lungs. A single bulb swung from the rafters, dead. But my beam caught the wire trembling as though something invisible breathed on it. The ladder groaned behind me, as if a weight had followed me up. I turned slow. Nothing. The library below had gone silent. No alarms, no whispers. Just the faint drip of liquid still seeping through cracks in the plaster. I coughed hard, pulled the collar of my uniform up over my mouth. My hand shook, but I opened the nearest box. Rotten paper smell. Inside, spirals of journals, leather warped with moisture, each stamped in neat silver. MH. I flipped one open. Handwriting cramped, angular. They told me the rules keep them out. But it isn't true. The rules only trade time. Every shift they push harder. The girl waits by the drive. The eyes burn through the fence. The attic. God help me. The attic wants company. Margin notes scrawled. Don't breathe, don't move, don't. The pen had torn straight through paper. The chandelier tick echoed faintly through the beams above, muffled but steady, like the house's pulse traveled upward. Another entry, dated 5 years ago. Rule 4 is bait. It dares you to climb. Once you do, you're in their mouth. But downstairs they rot you slow. Here at least it's quick. I dropped the journal back, heart hammering. On the floorboards lay a photograph, face down. I picked it up with 2 fingers sticky from dust. Beatrice, same blue dress, same stiff smile as the portrait downstairs. But here her glass eyes were cracked, black void spilling through the paper. The frame's edge was shattered sharp, enough to cut. A laugh rang out, light, childish, but wrong. Not echoing, not outside, directly under me. I froze, knees locking. The sound moved in quick steps, bare feet slapping boards beneath inside the library I had just left. Don't move, don't talk, don't breathe. I mouthed it again, old reflex, but the chant tasted like chlorine in my throat. The laugh darted left, right, circling. More footsteps joined, heavier, like a whole crowd gathering under the attic hatch. The ladder creaked, as though tested by hands that weren't mine. I killed the flashlight. Crouched in dark, my pulse did the counting for me. Through the planks beneath, light flared red, unnatural, like a furnace roaring awake. The boards warmed against my palms. Then, slow and deliberate, one voice rose above the chorus. A man's, tired, cracked. You shouldn't have come up here. I bit my tongue, blood pooling copper in my mouth. Journal pages rustled behind me, on their own. One of the spirals flipped open. Words scratching themselves in fresh ink. I forced my eyes forward, not daring to read. But the sound kept writing, louder, like chalk dragged across drywall. My stomach knotted, because the cadence of the pen was mine. The laugh below silenced, silence worse than sound. Then knock, 3 raps against the hatch. Not frantic, polite. I stared at the ladder. shadows shifting though no light touched. Something whispered, so close my ear ticked with warm breath, "Your shift is almost over." The chandelier and the beams above ticked once. Sharp, 14 a.m., log suspended, Marcus's journal compromised, rules uncertain. The attic groaned, a rib cage trying to breathe. Dust drifted in sheets, my mouth filled with pennies and chlorine. Whispers braided through insulation. Not outside, inside the beams. The flashlight shook in my grip. Below, the chandelier ticked once, the sound climbing the joists like a vein. The portrait of Beatrice leaned in the rafters, canvas bleeding at the edges. Her eyes blinked, frames missing like bad footage buffering. Then the far wall tore open, not a collapse, an aperture. Red static seeped through, moving heavy as liquid, sagging downward, denser than smoke. The journal in my lap scalded, ink spidered into veins, pages ripped open by unseen hands. Fresh gouges carved themselves deep. Break one rule. Only one. Beatrice's laugh floated up, high, bright, threaded with static. The ladder rattled, floor inhaled, pulling shadows up in black coils with eyes like coals. The chandelier ticked again, faster. Voices braided into one chorus. Break one rule. Just one. Pills for your mother, food for your daughter, court notices erased. I froze. For a second the attic wasn't rafters, but my kitchen table at home. Past due bills fanned like knives. My daughter's crayon drawing pinned by a pharmacy receipt. Mom's pill bottles rattling empty. A smaller voice cut through. My kids. Daddy? Soft. Almost behind me. My thumb hovered over the key fob. My chest lurched forward, half ready to surrender. Then the static bent the word wrong. Daddy. Drawn out too long. Turned into a hiss. I gripped the fob until plastic split. No, I whispered. I don't feed you. I don't join you. 3 a.m. The red fire convulsed. It didn't burn, it rewrote. Rugs unspooled into threads. Wood lines reversed like VHS tape spooling backward. Portraits collapsed into pixels and vanished. The chandelier gave its last tick, then dropped. Crystals shattered midair, erased before they struck floor. The mansion wasn't burning. It was being deleted. Last 3 a.m., I ran. Beams bowed, reels snapped, rafters splintered. The attic window, painted shut for decades, split as if lungs expelled me. The red static clawed at my heels, suction stripping marrow. I dove. Glass ripped my arms. Dirt took me hard. I rolled down the ridge, coughing chlorine and grit. Behind, the house folded into a clean hole. No ruin. No ash. Just absence. At the ridge's edge I looked back. Beatrice stood on nothing. Hair unmoving in wind that roared everywhere else. Her head cocked, smile cracked wider than her face. Each tick of the vanished chandelier made her eyes flare red. Pulse sink. She lifted one hand. Not to wave, but to pinch her fingers like tugging an invisible chain. The air ticked with her. Then silence. E4 6 a.m., descending the ridge. Palms shredded, lungs raw, mansion gone. But the Santa Ana wind carried a faint chlorine tang, and buried in it, a faint tick-tick. As if a sodium street lamp down in the valley was learning the rhythm. Shh. Log 12 a.m. Status, mansion erased, ridge intact. Still taste chlorine, still hear the tick. Internal report, Crestline anomaly, Beverly Hills file ID, CR17BH archive. Prepared by analyst redacted, clearance. Level 3 internal distribution only, date, redacted, Section 9, executive summary. Unredacted, a containment lapse occurred at the Crestline estate, Beverly Hills. Result, total structural erasure. One security contractor, Ethan redacted, presumed unrecovered. Asset destruction assessed as non-salvageable. Public narrative released. Faulty gas line ignited during seasonal Santa Ana winds, causing total fire loss. No civilian casualties reported. Section 2. Incident timeline, abridged in 240. Subject logged minor anomalies, consistent with prior baseline. 255. External witness reports faint alarms, described as like old sirens underwater. 310. Subject's logbook record simultaneous failure of driveway lamps, internal whispers, attic breach. Rapid red light phenomenon engulfed structure. Surveillance feeds terminated. Static only. Still, property erased to foundation footprint. Residual chlorine tang detected 0.8 miles downwind. Section 3. Witness accounts. Neighbor number 1, rear property, poolside. There was light but not fire. Red like the inside of your eyelids if you press hard. I smelled bleach. Then it was gone. Neighbor number 2, Northridge. Heard a girl laughing, not just once, rhythmic like it matched something mechanical. My wife says it was crying. We argued about it after. Neighbor number 3, delivery driver passing Wilshire. The whole hill looked like it was breathing, then nothing. Just dust, and I swear one of the street lamps was ticking, like a metronome. Section 4. Physical residue. No organic remains recovered. Garden palms surrounding estate, instant desiccation, cell walls collapsed, resin solidified black. Concrete foundation, glassy surface, fused as if exposed to localized plasma arc. Odor profile, chlorine, metallic dust, faint sweetness, source undetermined. Section V. Guard log fragments, Ethan redacted. Recovered journal fragments confirm accelerated anomaly escalation. Final legible entry, 0359. The house is writing over itself. They want me to follow her. One rule broken, then another. Not fire, it's erasure. Not collapse, swallowing. If anyone finds this, still taste chlorine. Still hear the tick. Section Cis. Management Addendum. M. Hale. Restricted circulation. Do not disseminate beyond L3. Rules do not bind the anomaly. They bind us. They are scaffolds, delaying collapse until the cycle demands renewal. Subject, redacted, engaged too deeply, mirroring patterns of prior contractors. His handwriting already conformed to cadence before breach. Replacement was inevitable. Containment at Crestline has concluded. The anomaly is not destroyed. It has relocated, as it always does. Residual signature traced near Wilshire and La Cienega public infrastructure. One sodium lamp recorded sustained oscillation, glass vibrating as if tapped from inside. Pedestrians described the sound as a faint tick. Draft of Crestline Rules V2.0 to be circulated shortly. Contractors rotate, cycles reset. The chandelier always ticks, /end addendum. Distribution, internal only, asset containment division. Archive copy logged under redacted. File fragment, personal account, audio transcript. Source, anonymous upload, time-stamped 14 a.m. Location, Ren La Cienega, Los Angeles. I was walking back from a late shift, no cars. Just wind pushing grit down Wilshire, palms rattling against billboards. That's when I noticed the street lamp, not out, not flickering, just ticking. A sodium bulb, orange wash on the sidewalk, should hum like all the others. But this one ticked. Slow. Patient. A pulse climbing through the glass like a vein lit from the inside. I stopped under it. The air smelled faintly chlorinated, like a YMCA pool that's been closed too long. Sweet under it, like candy left in a hot car. The wind carried both smells, then none, as though the air itself couldn't decide what it was. I thought of moving, but my shoes felt nailed to the concrete. Across the street, a billboard for luxury condos showed a little girl holding a blue balloon. Only her smile seemed wider than it had when I drove by yesterday. The ink ran as though humidity had bled it, even though the night was dry. The lamp ticked again, louder. For a second, the orange glow dimmed red, faint as breath against glass. That's when I heard it. A laugh. Child's laugh, high, brittle, bouncing off stucco, echoed wrong, like two recordings layered out of sync. I whispered, don't know why. Beatrice? The billboard's balloon burst, just split open on paper. Red leaked down her arm, dripping across vinyl. The lamp ticked twice in fast succession, my ears filled with static. Not sound exactly, but pressure, like when a speaker cone rips. I looked up. The glass bulged outward, round, as though something inside was pressing to get through. The metal casing whined. The tick syncopated with my pulse. I wanted to run. My brain screamed to. But the lamp threw a circle of light like a cage. My shadow bent inward, not outward, stretching toward the pole as if gravity pulled it. In the shadow, there were more legs than mine, small ones. Bare feet, toes curled, standing just at the edge of the circle. A voice whispered near my ear, not through air. Inside bone. Your shift is almost over. I staggered back. My heel struck the curb. For a blink, every other lamp down Wilshire blinked red in unison. Like the whole block inhaled. Then, normal again. I ran. Didn't care who saw. Didn't care how it looked. My shadow didn't follow at first. It hung near the lamp like it wanted to stay. When it finally snapped back under me, it was thinner. I swear, it was thinner. When I got to the corner, I turned. The billboard was clean. No red. The girl held her balloon. Perfect smile. The lamp was steady amber, quiet. Except, I could still hear the tick. Not from it, from inside my head. Every 5 seconds. Exact. I checked my watch. Every tick matched the second hand. It's still doing it now. Silence. If I stop hearing it, maybe that's good. Maybe it means it's gone. Or maybe it means I've been replaced. Analyst note, internal, level 3, origin of file unknown, likely hoax. Audio artifacts inconclusive. Cross-reference with Crestline incident, shows pattern overlap, chlorine tang, billboard anomaly, lamp distortion. Recommend monitoring utilities grid along Wilshire corridor. Sodium lamps may act as vectors post-erasure event. Distribution, internal only, not for public release.